This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt stuck, whether it's a major life transition, a dark night of the soul, or just staying small out of fear. If you've ever struggled to move forward, if you're repeating unhealthy patterns in relationships, or you have a black belt in beating yourself up, you were meant for more, and this podcast is for you. We'll get real, we'll get vulnerable, we'll probably cuss a little bit, and we'll get to the root of it all, your self-worth. With every step, you'll find the courage to rise. Today's podcast is one of my favorite topics. I mean, they're all my favorite topics. It's my podcast, but it's about worthiness. It's about your self-worth. It's about my self-worth. It's about self-worth in general. So here's where I want to start with this today. Break this down with me. Have you noticed in society and conversation in your life that there is this very delicate balance that you are, it's unspoken, sometimes, not always, expected to walk between think highly of yourself, oh, but don't think too highly of yourself. Oh, be confident, oh, but don't be too confident. Oh, think that you're worthy. Oh, but don't have too inflated of a sense of yourself. And this balance, here's what I find to be true. The people that typically that would apply to, whereby an inflated sense of confidence is actually not confidence. It's a form of dissociation that leads to extreme danger to self and others. That's an outlier, and that's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about is you, dear listener, and me, dear speaker, and this idea that is in our culture that you can't think too highly of yourselves. You have to value yourself, but not too much. And it's that phrase of don't get a big head. Ooh, I don't want to compliment them too much. I don't want them to get a big head. Well, while that's possibly well-meaning, it's one of those things that exists that can we just do this together? Can we just pretend it's a piece of paper? Can we just ball it up, throw it in the corner, ball it up, light it on fire, get rid of it all together? Because the problem, and it's not even a problem, but the thing that most people come up against is not, quote unquote, having a big head. That's not the issue. It's yes, do we want to have a balanced sense of our own knowledge and abilities? Yes, because in its extreme, it's well, if I'm confident I can fly a plane, but I've never actually taken any kind of aviation training, then that's just literal delusion, right? That's a different thing that we're not talking about. What I'm talking about today is this idea, and I think it's an unconscious fear that has been inculcated into us of oh, you can't think too highly of yourself, you'll have a big head, right? You don't want to you don't want to think too much of yourself. Y'all, if you're listening to this podcast, I guarantee you are not a person who is in danger of ever thinking too highly of yourself in any way that would be remotely dangerous or detrimental to you or anybody else. And then the other thing is that we don't do it consciously, but we will tear other people down if we see somebody that's walking around, they're oh, well, she sure thinks her shit don't stink, or he sure thinks that he's X, Y, and Z. Well, here's a spoiler alert. Chances are they don't actually think that. Chances are they're probably wildly insecure about themselves. As a general rule, and it's a sweeping statement, people that you see that are impeccably dressed to the nines, or women, I love you, but those of you that refuse to go out of the house without makeup on, and it's like a pathological thing, I love you so much. You are so beautiful. And if you want to wear makeup, it is absolutely your right to wear makeup. But when it becomes a thing where you literally feel like you can't go out without it, you are so beautiful. Anyway, okay, let me not divert into something else. But the people that you see that really are so particular about their appearance or show what you would say, like, oh, they think so highly of themselves, they have such a big head, chances are they don't. Chances are, whether they're conscious of it or not, they're finding their value in something outside of themselves. And it's okay. We all do it. It's a human thing. And so we don't want to fall into judgment of that. We just want to notice it and notice sometimes our tendency to say, oh, well, don't they think so highly of themselves? What if instead you go, girl, get it, think highly of yourself? But again, that's not usually what's happening. What's usually happening is this unconscious need, impulse to define our value by something outside of ourselves, to define our value by how we look, to define our value by our body. Ooh, I've got on 5 extra pounds. And so, this goes into all kinds of stuff about body image, and I don't want to go into any of that right now. I'm just using this as the example that we have this narrow band within ourselves where we think we are only worthy under certain conditions, right? It's conditional worthiness. And then we will do this to each other unconsciously where, it's, don't think too highly of yourself, or you say something that's kind of confident and maybe, a friend or somebody in your social circle makes a comment about it like, oh, don't you think highly of yourself? Well, yeah, I do think highly of myself, and that's actually a good thing. But what I'm calling attention to is a couple different things here. The key thing, there are always going to be ways that we will unconsciously tear each other down as humans, and that's something that we want to bring awareness to, because all it is it's conditioning. It's things in our society that have crept in to keep each other small and to keep ourselves small. So that's one thing. The other thing is this idea of conditional worthiness, that we have these unconscious, usually unconscious. I guarantee you have both conscious and unconscious conditions for your own worthiness. And part of your assignment, if you choose to accept it, is to explore with curiosity and with love and compassion, what are those conscious and unconscious rules that you have yourself, for yourself, by which then you will be considered worthy. Because here is what is actually true. And it's okay if you don't believe me right now. I just want you to file this away in maybe it could potentially be true. You, by your very existence, the soul that you are in this human body, sitting here listening to me, walking, driving, whatever it is you're doing, you are inherently valuable by the fact that you exist. Anything above and beyond that is just icing on the cake or sprinkles on the sundae or whatever little extra you want to call it. You're worthy. There aren't conditions. There are no conditions. It's not when you're a certain weight. It's not when you've made a certain amount of money. It's not when you're in a relationship. It's not when you've healed the shit with your parents or when you've healed the shit with your ex or any of those things. And it's not the, well, she says that, but she doesn't know this little dark secret about me. Welcome to being human. We are an entire tapestry of experiences. You are still valuable. You are still worthy. You still have inherent worth that is unconditional. And so why I wanted to talk about this today was specifically to call attention, one, to bring your awareness to those conscious and unconscious places that you have these conditions that you're placing on your own worth and your own value, but also to give you this perspective so that A, we don't continue to do this to other people, and B, so that you will change your perspective not only of yourself, but of others. You've heard me say this before. I want you to hear me say it so many times that you get fucking sick of me saying it. You are 1 in 8 billion. You are so fucking unique. And all those things that are unique about you, that's literally what makes you special. That is what makes you unconditionally worthy. It is what makes you unconditionally awesome, because you are 1 of 8 billion souls on this planet. And so let me give you an example of a lot of women that I work with. are in the dating world. And there's a perspective, I can't take credit for this. A coach gave this to me years ago, but there's a perspective about dating that dating is just getting to know another human on the journey. And then I go further with it and say, really, each date is just to see, do you want to have one other date? But this podcast episode is not about dating. But what she used to say was, see that person as a human soul. Just see them as a soul. And all you're doing in that date is you're just having a conversation with another soul. And whether or not they are somebody you want to go out with again, whether or not they end up being your quote unquote person, really doesn't matter. In that moment, the gift that you each have for each other is that you're sharing an exchange on the human journey. Now, that exchange could be very brief. You could be like, oh, no, he is rude and this and that, and I'm out. Or she is rude and this and that, and I'm out. Or it could be a very nice conversation, but something that doesn't really turn into anything else, but you've still shared a moment in time with another soul on the journey. Guess what? You're lucky to have had that experience, and so are they. And it's a radical perspective shift because there's all kinds of things people will come up with of like, well, but this, but that, blah, 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 blah. Just consider this as a perspective. If each one of us on this journey authentically owned and unapologetically owned our unique worth and acted accordingly. That doesn't mean perfection. That doesn't mean you think you're better than anybody else, because that is not at all what it's about. Because there's not a finite amount of worth whereby if I feel worthy, someone else can't feel worthy. That's not how this works. We live in an abundant fucking universe. And if I walk around with the inherent confidence that I am the very best version of myself in any given moment, which doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you don't have a bad day. It doesn't mean you don't get tired. It doesn't mean anything like that. All it means is that in any given moment, I am the very best me. There is no one else that is me. That alone makes you inherently worthy. That alone makes you fucking magical. And so if you take that perspective and then you take the perspective that every other person you encounter is also fucking magical in their own unique brilliance as a soul on this journey, then that creates a very different perspective of this idea of, ooh, don't get a big head or think highly of yourself, but not too highly of yourself, right? Because you owning all that you are. And to be clear, this doesn't mean, it's not like you have to wait until you know who you are in the world to feel worthy. The entire human experience is about discovery. It's about learning. It's a journey. So wherever you are today, whatever you're experiencing, if you're walking through hell or if you're on the other side, wherever you are on that spectrum, you're amazing. You're wonderful. You're absolutely worthy. You are merely a soul on this human experience. You're learning things. You're experiencing things. You're growing. That's it. You're still a magical fucking unicorn or whatever animal resonates with you. And bringing awareness to the parts of you that feel otherwise, right? And doing so with absolute love and compassion of, ooh, I'm defining myself by something outside of me. Isn't that interesting? And guess what? Spoiler alert, you don't even have to know where it came from. You don't have to sit in therapy for 5 years to go back to the exact moment where you made the unconscious key decision that you were going to place your value on whatever external thing it is. You don't have to do that. I mean, if you really, really want to, you can, but you don't have to do that. All you really have to do, and when I say all you have to do, I'm not minimizing, right? I'm just giving the perspective that these things are not as big and daunting sometimes as they feel like they are. All you have to do is bring awareness to the fact I am placing my value outside of myself right now in this moment. it feels very difficult for me to acknowledge my own worthiness. Because what that's doing is it's stating something that's true, but it's not creating a belief that it's not possible for you. Okay? All it's doing is saying, right now in this moment, this is what I'm experiencing. And depending on where you are with this, then you can take it a step further and say, I am choosing to believe that I am inherently worthy, even if right now in this moment, can't quite wrap my mind around it yet, right? Because what's the alternative? You continue to live in a way of not feeling worthy or placing all your worth outside yourself. And guess what? You already know how that movie ends. You've done it really well. So it's a process. And none of these things are light switches. So what you will find when I talk about the conscious and unconscious conditions that you have for yourself, they're going to evolve. And it is like peeling the onion. You're going to find ways where you're like, ooh, I didn't even realize I was putting my value on that. I might have realized I had that I have an awareness that I've been putting my value on my professional success. Interesting. You may already have awareness of that. You may be unpeeling that, right? Taking off all of those layers to understand that who you are is not dependent upon what it is that you do for a living or otherwise, right? But then there will be other places where you just go, oh, interesting. I didn't realize that I was putting my value outside of myself. Isn't that cute that I did that? And just continue to anchor in the idea, even if right now it sounds radical as fuck and you think I'm crazy, that's fine. I don't really care. I love you, but I don't really care. And just bring it back to the radical idea that you are worthy just because you draw breath. And everything on top of that is a bonus. It doesn't mean we don't work to live a good life by our definition. It doesn't mean anything like that. All it means is that we stop giving our power away to the idea that A, we're not worthy as we are, B, that worth is conditional, and C, that we could ever get to a place where we think too highly of ourselves. That's crap. It's absolute crap. The actual intention, the actual goal, think about it this way. If every person that you encountered literally knew and deeply understood and accepted they are inherently valuable, they are inherently loved beyond all human comprehension, how much need would there be for conflict, for war, for fighting, for anything to do with survival? Or would we live in a community where everyone is each supporting the other because we are first and foremost taking care of ourselves, and then from the overflow taking care of each other, and then our time and our energy is spent on continuing to evolve in this human experience? Now, I understand that getting everybody on board this train is a statistical impossibility, and that's okay. I'm just painting that picture for you so that you can start to see the contrast, whereby one person thinking and owning their brilliance authentically, right, does not detract from this person over here. That if all of us really start to understand our sovereign power, our unconditional worthiness, that switch alone starts to create a ripple effect with everyone around you. And I'm going to stop it there because otherwise I'm going to go down 16 different rabbit holes and there we are. But I really would like to invite you to consider this idea. Like I said, consider these two things. Consider where in social situations we tend to fall into, either notice it in other people. Sometimes it's easier to see it in other people. Sometimes it's harder to see the mirror and the reflection of ourselves, but it happens, where you notice that this might be happening, where you might see somebody and go, oh, well, they think highly of themselves. No judgment on yourself. You're not a terrible person. You're human. You're just noticing and observing as if you were an explorer who discovered this human being named you, and you're just curious about their life, what they're experiencing, and what they're thinking. Curiosity with no judgment, just observation of what's going on. And just notice what those thoughts are that you either have about somebody else, and then, of course, that you have about yourself. Because I guarantee you, if you are listening to this, there is no bloody way that you will ever think too much of yourself. I want you to think, quote unquote, too much of yourself, because there is no such thing as too much. And when you balance that with the humility that comes with actually understanding this human experience, and at the core of that is literally just the inherent love of this experience of yourself, of all of existence, you're not going to ever be at the point where you have a quote unquote big head. It's just naturally going to take care of itself. So the invitation is to look at what are those conditions that you've been placing on your worth, and what are the conditions that you might notice that you place on your definition of what makes someone else worthy, because spoiler alert, that's a reflection of you. So just consider that. Just think about it and understand, to whatever degree that you're willing to accept it at this point, that there is absolutely nothing that you have to do. You are unconditionally loved. You are unconditionally worthy, just as you are today. Any kind of growth that you want to do on top of that is exactly perfect, but there's no goal to reach, at which point then you suddenly become worthy. You are already worthy. Your journey is the process of you deeply feeling, realizing, and accepting that fact. I love you. I love you. I love you. Sparkle on. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Courage to Rise podcast. Visit my website, couragetorise.com, for more information on one-on-one coaching, group coaching programs, and other upcoming events. Remember, life's too short not to sparkle. Sparkle on.